You ever think about how much learning, like actual learning, is happening online these days?
It's mind-boggling, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's not just like a little corner of education anymore. It's huge.
Yeah.
And with all those virtual classrooms and online courses and everything,
Ah,
there's just this massive amount of data being generated.
mountains of it.
It makes you wonder, right?
For sure.
How do we really get a handle on what's going on in these digital spaces? Like beyond just looking at grades, you know, the kind of traditional measures of success.
Right. How do we crack the code of online learning? I mean, it's not just about the numbers, is it?
Exactly. That's what we're diving deep into today, just for you.
Sounds intriguing.
So we stumbled across this really cool systematic review.
Okay.
It's called Social Network Analysis in E-Learning Environments. And guess what?
What's that?
It turns out there's this approach. It's called Social Network Analysis,
Oh, interesting.
SNA for short.
I've heard of that, yeah.
It can help us unlock some really surprising insights from all those online interactions.
So we're talking about mapping out the relationships between students, teachers, maybe even the course materials themselves.
Exactly. You're getting it.
Okay.
Basically, SNA uses these visual tools, kind of like network maps. You can actually see who's connected to whom, and it uses math, like real math, to find patterns in those connections.
I like the sound of this.
It's super cool.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a question.
Shoot.
Where did this whole idea of SNA even come from? Like, is it something brand new?
Well, it might surprise you. The seeds were planted a long time ago, actually. Back in the 1930s, researchers at Harvard were already looking at patterns and how people relate to each other. But the term social network itself didn't pop up until the mid-50s. And then in the 60s, things really took off and they started developing these specific methods.
So it's got a rich history.
Oh yeah, for sure. And what's really fascinating is that SNA isn't confined to one field. It pulls in ideas from everywhere. We're talking sociology, psychology, anthropology. It even embraced graph theory from mathematics really early on. So it's a real melting pot of disciplines all trying to understand how we connect.
I get it. So it's way more than just like counting how many friends someone has on Facebook.
Right. It's about understanding the quality of those connections, the structure. How do those relationships actually shape what happens within the network? And that's where things get especially exciting for e-learning. Think about it. Blogs, wikis, forums, all those Web 2.0 tools that are all about interaction and collaboration.
Mm.
They naturally create these social networks of learners. It's like built in.
Right. If you're in an online course and there's a forum for discussion, you're not just out there on your own. You're constantly interacting, right, with other students, the instructor. It's a network.
Exactly. And SNA is perfectly suited to analyze all that data that flows from those different communication channels. Who's replying to whom in a forum post? Who's editing which parts of a shared document? It can track all of that.
So for this deep dive, what are we hoping to uncover about SNA and how it applies to e-learning?
Good question. So our goal is to really explore the kinds of research questions that SNA has been used to answer in the world of e-learning. What are the common ways researchers measure these networks?
Right.
What are the specific characteristics they focus on? What juicy insights have they gained about online learning? And where could future research in this area take us? And we're going to base all this on that thorough review you brought to the table.
So just to clarify for our listeners, this review wasn't just a quick scan of a few articles. It was pretty in-depth, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It delved into 37 different studies that applied SNA to e-learning environments between 1999 and 2012. So it gives us a really solid overview of how researchers have been using SNA to understand online learning over more than a decade.
37 studies over a decade.
Well,
Okay. So was there a steady flow of research, or did interest in using SNA for e-learning kind of, grow over time?
it's interesting, actually. The review found a clear upward trend. In the early years, between 1999 and 2005, there were only 9 studies published. Then things picked up speed. 13 studies between 2006 and 2009, and then even more, 15 studies between 2010 and 2012.
So a definite surge in interest. What do you think might have driven that?
Well, the review itself points to a couple of things. The rise of MOCs, those massive open online courses, likely played a part.
Makes sense.
I mean, those courses can have thousands, even tens of thousands of people interacting online, generating an incredible amount of data. And SNA is perfectly equipped to handle that kind of volume.
Right, it's made for it.
Yeah. And the review also suggests that just the overall expansion of e-learning and its growing importance in education probably led more researchers to explore new and sophisticated ways to analyze these learning environments.
Right. As e-learning becomes more mainstream, there's more demand for understanding it.
Right.
Okay, so we had these 37 studies spanning over a decade. But were they all equally influential? Did some have a bigger impact than others?
That's a good question. And the number of times a study gets cited by other researchers is a pretty good indicator of its influence.
Mhm.
So there's definitely variation there. For example, a study by Martinez and colleagues from 2003, it's been cited an impressive 239 times. And another study from the same year, Aviv et al., isn't far behind with 235 citations.
Wow, those are some impactful studies.
For sure. But if you compare that to a study by Haythorne-Thwaite from 1999, which has only garnered 42 citations,
Okay.
even though it was published in the same year as another study, Nurmela et al., that has 129 citations. So the age of the study might play a role, but it seems like certain research questions or findings really resonated more strongly with the academic community.
Interesting. So some lines of inquiry really caught on. So what were the main research areas that these studies were tackling? What were they trying to find out about e-learning using SNA?
The review actually identified three major themes. The first one was the evaluation and/or implementation of SNA software tools. Basically, some researchers were focused on developing or using specific software that could do the heavy lifting of social network analysis in educational settings.
So like building the tools for the job.
Exactly. And the review lists several papers in this area: S8, S26, S30, S32, and S34. They were all about how to effectively apply SNA in the real world of online learning.
Okay, makes sense. You need the right tools to do the analysis. What about the second big research area?
The second, and by far the most prevalent, focus was the analysis of interaction patterns. This is where researchers got down to the nitty-gritty of how people connect and communicate within the online learning environment.
So mapping out who's talking to whom.
Exactly. And they were looking at specific types of interactions. One area was information sharing, how knowledge and resources flow through the network. The review highlights paper S3 for this. Another big one was communication and collaborative learning, where researchers investigated how students interacted when they were working together on projects. Papers S2, S5, S12, S16, S23, and S37 delve into this.
Which makes a lot of sense, right? So much of online learning involves group work.
Oh, absolutely. And they also looked at communicational activities within specific online tools. Think microblogging platforms like Paper S33, wikis like S21, chats S29, and most frequently, forum discussions, papers S7, S9, S25, S28, S31. They were trying to figure out how the structure of the network within these different tools shape things like participation, contribution, and engagement.
Okay. So beyond just communication, were they also looking at how these interactions connected to actual learning outcomes?
Yes, definitely. Some studies focused on interaction patterns involved in constructing knowledge, trying to see how connections between learners help them grasp the material better. Papers S1, S13, and S36 cover this. And then there were studies that looked at interactions related to activity or task completion, who is interacting with whom to get things done in the course. Paper S19 is an example.
So a whole spectrum of interaction types, from basic information sharing to actually building knowledge together.
Yeah.
What was the third major theme of the research?
The third one was all about using the insights from SNA to actually improve learning design. They wanted to figure out how to create more effective online learning experiences.
Okay. So how does SNA actually help with that?
They looked at a bunch of different aspects. For instance, how to design the overall learning environment itself. Paper S17 explored that. Then there was research on how SNA could inform strategies for social learning. Paper S24 delves into that. And they looked at the design of discussions specifically to figure out how to make online interactions more productive. Paper S35 covers this. And really importantly, they looked at the roles of both students and teachers within the network. So papers like S4, S6, S10, S11, S15, S18, S20, and S22 all touched on this.
Because understanding those roles into virtual classroom is crucial, right?
It is, absolutely. And understanding those roles can really help instructors tailor their approach. Some other subtopics in this area included identifying motivations for contributing to the network, what makes some students more active than others. That's what paper S27 looked at. And finally, they were really interested in the impact of network structure on learning performance. Does being well connected in the network translate into better grades or a deeper understanding? That's what paper S14 explored.
So lots of practical applications for designing better online learning.
Definitely.
Now, when researchers were actually analyzing these networks, what were some of the key features or characteristics they were focusing on?
One important concept they considered was the network mode. This basically refers to whether you're looking at relationships within a single group of people or between two different groups. And almost all the studies, all but one, focused on one-mode networks.
Okay, and what does that mean exactly?
So in a one-mode network, you're looking at a single type of entity, like students, and you're analyzing the relationships between them. Or you might look at students and teachers together as one group. The relationships could be things like communication, collaboration, even just acknowledging each other's posts. The one exception, which was study S28, probably looked at connections between two distinct types of things, like maybe students and learning resources, for example.
Got it. So mainly focusing on the connections between participants in the learning environment. What are the basic building blocks of these networks? How are they structured?
So at the most fundamental level, networks are made up of nodes and ties. Think of nodes as the individual actors within the network. Each student, each instructor, they're all nodes.
Yeah.
And ties are the connections or relationships between those nodes. They're the links that bind people together. The review found that the number of nodes in the studies varied a lot. Most looked at groups of between 5 and 50 participants, but some analyzed much larger online learning communities. And as we've discussed, those individuals were typically students at various levels of education and their teachers.
Makes sense. And what kinds of ties, those connections, were they actually analyzing? What were those relationships based on?
So the review used a helpful taxonomy developed by Borgatti and others to categorize different types of ties. It includes things like similarity, social relationships, interaction, and resource flow. And interestingly, most of the studies, 33 out of 37, zeroed in on interaction ties.
What do interaction ties involve specifically?
Interaction ties arise from specific actions between the nodes. So one student sending a message to another, two students working on a problem together, an instructor commenting on a student's post. It's about who's doing what with whom in the online space.
Okay.
And within this broad category of interaction ties, they break it down further into communicational interactions and interactions to solve tasks.
Okay, so give me some examples of each type.
Communicational interactions include things like using forums, chatting, emailing, and those were analyzed in 22 studies, specifically studies S4, S8, S10, S12, S13, S19, S20, S21, S23, 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 S24, S25, S25, S27, S27, S31, S33, S34, S35, S36, and S37.
Wow.
Those were the focus of 11 studies. S1, S2, S3, S6, S7, S9, S11, S14, S15, S18, and S30.
So it's largely about mapping the communication and collaboration that's happening online.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
Now, to make sense of all these networks, what were some of the analytical tools and techniques they were using?
Right, so that's where the specific SNA measures come in. These are ways to quantify different aspects of the network structure. And one really important set of measures has to do with centrality.
Centrality. That sounds like it tells you who's at the heart of things. What does it actually tell us about the network?
Centrality helps understand who has influence or access to information. It's based on the idea that the more connected someone is, the more important they likely are in the flow of communication or resources. And 14 of the studies really focused on these centrality measures. And centrality itself can be broken down into a few key types.
Okay.
There's degree centrality, which is just the number of connections a node has.
Yeah.
So how many classmates a student has interacted with, for example. This can indicate their access to different people and information.
Got it.
Then there's closeness centrality, which measures how quickly someone can reach everyone else in the network. So it might show who can spread information most efficiently.
Makes sense.
And finally, between aidiness centrality identifies those who act as bridges between different parts of the network, even if they don't have tons of direct connections themselves. They can control or filter the flow of information between groups.
So someone who connects different groups can be crucial, even if they're not the most outgoing person in the class.
Exactly. Another important measure is density, which tells you how interconnected the network is as a whole. It's the proportion of actual connections compared to all the possible connections in the group. High density means most people are connected to each other, which can suggest a strong sense of community. 4 studies focused specifically on density, and another 13 used it in combination with centrality measures.
Okay, so degree, closeness between d-ness and density, those are some of the key measures. Did they use any other techniques to analyze these networks?
A couple of studies used some more advanced approaches, like block modeling and cluster analysis. Block modeling helps to simplify a really complex network by grouping together individuals who have similar patterns of connections. And cluster analysis is all about identifying tightly knit groups within the larger network. There were also 4 studies that unfortunately didn't actually specify which SNA measures they used in their analysis.
Of a variety of methods to choose from. What about the software they used to handle all this data? Was there a standard program?
There were a few that popped up repeatedly, like Usenet, GPhi, and Netminer. But some researchers took it a step further and developed their own custom tools that were tailored to their specific research questions.
Wow, so creating their own software.
Yeah, and the review mentioned some examples, like the work of Lin and Shen in 2004, Rabini and colleagues in 2012. It shows just how specialized this field can get.
For sure. One thing that really stood out to me in the review was the idea of combining SNA with content analysis. How often did researchers do that?
That's a great observation. The review found that 12 out of the 37 studies actually combined SNA with content analysis, or CA. CA is where you systematically analyze the text of the interaction, so the words in forum posts, chat messages, that kind of thing.
So SNA maps out the connections, and CA digs into the content of those interactions.
Exactly. And that combination gives researchers a much richer picture because they can see both the structure, who's connected to whom, and the substance, what they're talking about, and the quality of their contributions.
It's like getting the full story.
Right, because it's not just about how many connections you have, but about what those connections mean in terms of learning.
And what were some of the biggest takeaways? What did all this research reveal about e-learning when SNA was applied?
Well, there were some really interesting findings. One key takeaway is that SNA is really effective for generating quantitative descriptions of e-learning networks. Studies by Paredes and Chung, Haythornthwaite, and others demonstrated that you can use these SNA metrics to measure things like how much interaction is happening, the density of the network, who the key players are. It gives educators a more data-driven understanding of their online classrooms.
So you can go beyond just gut feelings and anecdotes. You have hard data.
Exactly. And those quantitative descriptions can lead to some really valuable discoveries. Several studies found that SNA can help pinpoint those students who are isolated in the online environment, as well as those who are highly popular or central. So if you can map out who's not connecting, you can reach out to those students who might be struggling. Laponin and others did some great work on this. It's really helpful for creating more inclusive and supportive online learning spaces.
Like a safety net for students who might be falling through the cracks.
Yes, exactly. Identifying those at-risk students early on, like Siemens and Long suggested, can make a huge difference.
And what about collaborative learning, which is such a big part of online courses these days?
Right. SNA provides a lot of insight there, too. Because so many online activities involve group work, it's crucial to see how students are participating within those groups and how the groups themselves are structured. Studies by Chen and Watanabe, Capuano and his colleagues, and others have used SNA to look at things like participation levels in online group projects and how different group compositions affect interaction. So if you're designing an online course with group work, understanding the interaction patterns can help you form more effective teams.
Makes sense. And what about the studies that combined SNA and content analysis? What additional insights did those provide?
As we discussed, that combination allows for a much deeper understanding of the quality of interactions. SNA tells you who's connecting, but content analysis helps you understand the nature of those connections. Are they just exchanging pleasantries, or are they really engaging in deep discussions about the course material?
Right.
Researchers like Rientes and Singh showed that by looking at both the structure and the content, you get a much clearer picture of how learning is actually happening. For example, Haythornthwaite's work looked at why students might prefer different communication channels for different tasks. And Laponin explored the link between participation and the quality of discussions.
It's not just about being connected, but about the kind of connections you make.
Exactly. There were also studies that focused on specific e-learning tools. What did SNA reveal in those contexts?
Yeah, what about those studies that zeroed in on wikis, microblogs, chats, forums? What did they find?
Well, for example, research on wikis found that the lack of clear guidelines or time limits could really affect contribution pattern. Studies on microblogging showed that students with similar levels of activity tended to connect with each other, which is interesting. And studies on forums use things like degree centrality to figure out who the active and less active participants were.
So SNA can provide platform-specific insights that can be really useful for optimizing how we use those tools.
Absolutely, whether you're a student or an educator.
Fascinating. What about insights that could directly inform the design of online learning experiences?
There were several studies that offered valuable insights there. One found that more open online learning environments compared to traditional learning management systems tended to have more connections between learners. Others looked at how the instructor's presence in the network influenced interaction, which is really interesting to consider. And some even found that students in self-taught courses would sometimes take on teacher-like roles within the network. So this research can really help educators think more deliberately about how they structure their courses.
It's all about understanding how the social dynamics impact learning. Right.
Absolutely.
Finally, the review touched on the learning theories that underpin this research. What were some of the main theoretical frameworks being used?
Well, the studies often drew on theories that emphasize the social nature of learning. So things like social learning theory, where we learn by observing others, social interdependency theory, which looks at how our outcomes are influenced by others, collaborative learning theory, focusing on learning through group work, and project-based learning theory, where learning happens through completing tasks together.
So it's not just about the data. It's about understanding how established learning theories play out in online settings.
Right. SNA gives us a way to see those theories in action.
So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
What would you say is the most significant value that SNA brings to e-learning?
To me, the biggest takeaway is that SNA lets us go beyond just counting clicks or looking at final grades. It gives us a much richer understanding of the social fabric of online learning communities. By showing us those patterns of interaction and connection, SNA can provide insights into student engagement, collaboration, and areas where we can improve course design and support learners more effectively. It helps us see those often hidden structures that are so crucial to online learning success.
It's like shining a light on the invisible forces at play.
I like that, yeah.
And as with any research area, there's still more to learn and areas to explore, right?
Absolutely. The field is still evolving. The review itself pointed out several directions for future research.
Like what? What are some of the big open questions?
One key area is to delve deeper into those two-mode networks we talked about, looking at the relationships between learners and the learning resources or activities. There's also a need to use a wider variety of SNA measures to get a more comprehensive picture of the network dynamics. And combining those quantitative SNA data with qualitative content analysis even more frequently will be essential for gaining those deep insights.
What else needs further investigation?
Another thing is to include other learner characteristics, like their personality or motivation, into the analysis. And then there's the challenge and opportunity of applying SNA to really massive online learning environments, like MOOCs with thousands of participants. And finally, we need more perspective and experimental research designs to understand the causal links between network structure and learning outcomes.
So a lot of fertile ground for future discoveries. To leave our listeners with something to ponder, think about how much of our lives now involves online interaction, right?
Oh, yeah.
From education to work to social communities, we're constantly connecting online. How might these principles of social network analysis that we've been discussing in the context of e-learning be applied to understand and maybe even improve other types of virtual communities or online collaborations that you're a part of? What unexpected patterns of connection and influence might emerge if you started mapping the relationships in your own digital world?
That's a great question to leave everyone with. Food for thought, for sure.
Thanks for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.